We are running tight. I'd be grateful if, I know it's difficult because the report is so rich, but if you can be as brief as possible. But over to you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished audience, now I have a little bit of a problem because normally I have 20 minutes, but I have 10 minutes left, so we're a little bit in a hurry. And the first thing I will do, I will give a hint. Look on the internet, provide on the homepage from Business Europe, the homepage of our institute, and they have the whole study, and you can look inside. So I can only give you some idea what may be the most important findings we outlined in the study. Look on that, and the first point, if we are discussing on industry, and what we realized this morning and yesterday also, is that we have to see that it's in the public debate, we had an ongoing misconception on industry, especially on industry and globalization, because the broad majority of the Europeans is on the way that saying there's a way on hollowing out the industrial productions, industrial base via globalization. But the opposite is true. Yes, we have an ongoing share of foreign inputs in our exports, yes, but it's not a one-way street. At the same time, exports have risen strongly because the competitiveness of our companies become better and better. And therefore, we do see a higher export-related domestic value added. That is a starting point for our debate. So what are the most important findings then behind this argument that industry matters? The first is that industry and manufacturing acts as a central hub for the organization of the value chain. Here we see all exports and imports of intermediate goods between EU member states, and you can realize manufacturing accounts for nearly every second euro in this intermediate trade within the EU. As we see, industry is an important market for many sectors, for example, logistics, business service providers. This means industry is the core of the European production network, and therefore you can realize that we have a lot of spillover effects from the industrial sector to all other activities. Only this information here, if we have an increase in industrial production by €1, we have an increase in the overall economic output by €1.68. That's higher than from all other economic activities. And the most important point I will explain to you is the aspect of joint production, because normally I used with a figure of about 15.8% of the share of the industrial production on GDP, but it's only a part of a story. Industry buys also intermediate inputs from other sectors. There are two reasons for that: outsourcing, and more importantly, industrial companies do not just sell machines anymore. Often they combine an industrial product with service packages. The numbers show that industry buys more intermediate inputs than it sells. These positive net intermediate purchases can be regarded as value added in other sectors caused by the industrial production and the industrial demand. We call it joint production, and the figure here is 8.5% of GDP. Together we have a 24% value added share of this joint production on the total economy, and to add, it does not mean that the political target of 20% is already reached. We have to reformulate this for the joint production. In 2020, we should have a goal of 30% for this joint production of industry and service sector as a combination. It's therefore especially important because it's a unique selling proposition for Europe, as you can see here. In Europe, we have these 8.5% of the joint production. In other developed countries of the world, only 2%, and it's slight negative in Asian emerging countries. So if we are going ahead, it's not only saying that we need more industry, we need a special kind of industry which is able to elaborate this hub function for the whole economy. In the last 10 to 15 years, we had a decrease of the overall manufacturing activity, but an increase of joint production. It counterbalanced the decline of the pure industry in this time. Another important point is the employment effect. 32 million jobs are created by the industrial sector, additional 20 million indirectly. To make clear what is the importance of this figure, 42 million are the combined figure of employment of UK and Italy, or it's 1/4 of the overall employment in the European Union. Looking on the innovation scheme, you will see here that we have, again, the figure 15.8 share of industrial production on GDP, but the industry counts for nearly 50% of innovation expenditure, counts for nearly 2/3 of the overall research and development expenditures. And what's important for that, because we had a debate on that in Davos on the World Economic Forum, you see a different pattern of innovation. In Europe, we have this tradition of family-owned firms, and we see most of the disruptive innovation in existing firms with a long history. In the US, you see disruptive innovation almost in new firms, and this is a different approach we have. It's not surprising that we have a high productivity and a higher productivity in industry than in all the other economic sectors, and from that, it's also quite clear that the industrial sector is able to pay higher wages across all skill classes. So if you want to have the perspective of an increase of GDP per capita, you have to do it this way to promote industrial activity. To come to an interim conclusion, the industry service network is an asset for Europe as an USP. Industry is an essential source of wealth in Europe, directly and indirectly. And Europe has cultural advantages for the integration of different work processes, while the US and China, this efforts in both economies, this effort for integration encounters more difficulties due to different attitudes defined by culture. And such an industry service network is especially important and successful when the cooperation focuses on the non-core business that is essential. So looking forward, what is the policy approach? Europe faces multiple economic challenges that are related to the megatrends, digitalization, globalization, and knowledge intensification. So key success factors for companies that can help us to master those challenges are service integration, internationalization, and innovation. Many studies show that these strategies improve competitiveness and innovative capacities. These drivers can be significantly strengthened by cooperation and value chain integration in Europe. And this is a part of the idea of the paradigm moving forward together to strengthen the networks, the cross-border networks in production, the cross-border networks in research and development, the cross-border networks in the service sector, and to use, therefore, the industry's power to integrate. There's a strong symbiosis between industry and service, as said before. The cooperation leads to specialization advantages and the exploitation of core competencies. So again and again, we have to focus on the combined sector. Internationalization leads to sales expansion and cost savings. Industry enables service providers to use the success factor internationalization, and through industrial products, 1,200 billion euro of goods and services of other sectors are exported indirectly, so industry is a machine to export for all the other. To be realistic, we should not ignore the problems we have, and especially in the integration of small and medium-sized enterprises in international value chain is still relatively low. So industrial frontrunners are companies which are disproportionately engaged in internationalization, research development, innovation, and therefore these industrial frontrunners are driving parts of international value chain, and they take SMEs, so to say, to the world markets. The ability to innovate, we discussed this also earlier, we heard something about that, is a key success factor. Today, innovation increasingly requires cooperation of companies along the value chain and cross-border, and again, industry dominates research and development. But cross-country knowledge networks are far less developed in Europe than production networks. There's a large potential for improvement if EU industrial policy fosters cross-border cooperation between companies and research institutions. So all those drivers of economic performance lead to economic success. Service integration, internationalization, especially of SMEs, and the innovation scheme. So I'm in time. 4 minutes?
Yep.
2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Yeah. I have 3 slides for 2 minutes. And that's also the last part of my presentation, the way forward. And the way forward, we shouldn't forget that we start not in a very good shape. Deindustrialization in Europe has progressed too far. The drop in industrial share of value added below 15% in some European member states is a warning signal. And European industry has lost higher shares of value added than other countries and regions around the world. So this is a danger. This is a downside of the mentioned positive spillover effect. This is a negative potential for value change and macroeconomic situation. We therefore welcome the goal back to 20 by 2020, or the ambitious goal 30 on joint production by 2020. And the key question is for policymakers how to get there. If you look on the competitiveness, the assessment of competitiveness of the European Union, you see on this indicator we elaborated in a study for the German Ministry of Economics that Europe has a lagging performance in international comparison. We have some remarkable regional differences between Europe. We have an ongoing divergence of GDP per capita since the crisis in 2008. So there's some tasks, there's a lot to do in all the member state countries, but what is the question, what is the purpose for the EU level? We believe that a new industrial compact is required to foster the paradigm of moving forward together and to tackle the challenge of global megatrends. The EU should promote competitiveness and enable business to move forward together and to strengthen their networks with other companies by further opening world and EU markets. We heard something about the single market aspect. By enhancing cross-border infrastructure, by fostering business cooperation, that means offering contact and innovation platforms, disseminating best business practices of value chain integration. The recent communication of the Commission on Industrial Policy follows this direction, but needs to be thoroughly implemented. Industrial policy needs to be upgraded in the new EU Industrial Compact. Revised EU industrial policy after the crisis goes in the right direction, but there's still a lack of implementation, and there are too many regulations which are unnecessarily burdensome and costly. Welcome, Mr. President Schulz. I'm a little bit in a hurry, but it's not it's no reason, it's not my talk here, but you have the chance to get the last results of our study, and I can present this to you. So the point is that we are in favor of an EU industrial compact because we see that is a way to mainstreaming all activities from the European level, looking on the industrial sector, looking at what is the impact on the combined of the joint production of the industrial sector and the service sector. And we need, therefore, a comprehensive competitiveness proofing in all areas of European policy. So in the 1 minute, sorry, and it's also important that we need a banking union because the financial aspect to make a backbone for this is most important. All this, we are very optimistic that we will see this because we had a long-standing tradition in Europe. And this is the last point. This poster here is from the beginning of the Marshall Plan. So we have a long-standing tradition in Europe to use the power we have in seeing that moving together and using the spirit of cooperation will work best. And this is the way we have to do it again, using the spirit of industrial activity in the combination from industry and the service sector, and especially use of the potential we have for a new policy approach in activating the networks we need in production, in research and development, and in the service sector Europe-wide. Thank you so far for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Hutter, thank you so much.